All right, everybody. Welcome back to Hawk Podcasts. This is going to be another episode of Hawk Droppings. I'm recording this on Thursday following Election Day. It's about 36 hours, give or take, since the election was called for Donald Trump. So we've had a day and a half or so to let this sink in. And I'm going to do this episode a little differently. Usually on Hawk Droppings, I pick one topic and I talk about that for 45 minutes or so. I'm going to do this episode in the style of our podcast, Coffee with Hawk, which is a twice a week news recap. Those episodes are about 20 minutes long. Obviously, given the result of this election, there's a lot to talk about. I've been reading a lot of things online. And so I'm going to do this episode more in the style of Coffee with Hawk and go through a lot of different things today. We're all feeling what we're feeling. We still need to remain engaged. And as much as we can, we need to keep looking forward. We have 74 days until Inauguration Day. About 10 and a half weeks, almost exactly. One of the things I'm going to be doing on this app is trying to learn, or in general, in my podcast, is I'm going to be trying to learn from people who know more than me as much as I can about how, in practical terms, everyday people can start to get ready for a second Donald Trump presidency. His second term is going to be dramatically worse than his first. He is now driven by vengeance and retribution. And raw power. He wants to get his hands on the Department of Justice and Attorney General, the FBI. And he has said that he is going to use the American military against the American people. So 10 and a half weeks, we'll start focusing on those issues in a few days. But right now, I just want to go through a bunch of things to recap where we're at and get a view of the world that is in front of us right now. So I want to start with an editorial out of the largest French newspaper. It's called Le Monde, and it's just simply titled "The End of an American World," and it's discussing the changing world order that is coming. And, take it for what it's worth, but let's talk about this. Donald Trump's reelection to a second term on Wednesday, November 6th, and the success of the Republican Party, of which he has taken total control, represent a major turning point for the United States. This time, the voters made an informed decision. In 2016, when they first entrusted him with the White House, American voters didn't know what a Donald Trump presidency would look like and were taking a leap into the unknown. In 2024, the situation is different. Not only did Republican voters know their candidate inside and out, right down to his least glorious behavior, he's even more radical now than he was 8 years ago. Trump's electorate knows where this president is going to take him, and they want more. It's a reality that needs to be examined with eyes wide open. The path on which Trump, strengthened for his second term by his party's success in the Senate, will take his country diverges fundamentally from the one charted by the United States since the end of the Second World War. It marks the end of an American era, that of an open superpower committed to the world, eager to set itself up as a democratic model. It's the famous shining city on a hill extolled by President Ronald Reagan. The model has been challenged over the past 2 decades. Now Trump's return is putting a nail in its coffin. Trump views the world solely through the prism of American national interests. It's a world of power struggles and trade wars which scorns multilateralism. A world where the transactional diplomacy replaces value-based alliances. A world ultimately where the U.S. president reserves his harshest words for his allies, but spares the autocrats, who are now seen as partners rather than adversaries. Europe is at risk of fracturing. Europeans rightly have bad memories of the first Trump term. The second will be even more perilous, with war raging on their continent, initiated by a Russian power that flouts all its international obligations and is increasingly aggressive. If, as he threatened during the campaign, Trump ceases military aid to Ukraine and negotiates peace with Vladimir Putin in favor of the invader, the consequences of such an outcome will go far beyond the fate of Ukraine alone. They will affect the European continent's security as a whole. There is a real risk that Europe will be divided or even fractured by such a prospect. This threat is existential for the European Union, and its leaders need to be aware of it and prepared to confront it without waiting for Trump to take office. They are long overdue. Trump's victory at the end of a campaign of unprecedented populist, misogynist, and racist virulence also bodes ill for women, immigrants, and democracy in general. The 47th president inherits a system he began to put in place when he was the 45th, one in which the sacrosanct checks and balances, those safeguards supposed to preserve American democratic institutions, are already weakened, and in which the Supreme Court has gone over to his side. He succeeded in downplaying the assault on the Capitol by rioters that he encouraged on January 6, 2021. The image of a head of the world's leading superpower who calls his opponents enemies from within, deems some of them worthy of the firing squad, vilifies dissident media, and threatens to send the army to hunt down illegal immigrants in democratic cities can only encourage illiberal leaders the world over, including in Europe. Trump's voters chose him in full consciousness, as did the business and tech leaders who rallied behind him, following in the footsteps of Elon Musk, the iconoclastic CEO turned something in French. The rest of the world will suffer. It's not just us who are going to pay the consequences for reelecting Donald Trump. It's going to reverberate around the world, throughout Europe, throughout Asia, throughout Russia, everywhere. The House of Representatives has not been called yet. There are many races that are still outstanding, and House Democrats are not conceding anything. Said House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, it is yet to be decided who will control the House in the 119th Congress. We must wait and count every vote, and we await results in Oregon, Arizona, and California. So I don't know what the chances are. It would be nice, bit of an understatement, if Democrats controlled the House. Hakeem Jeffries would be the Speaker of the House, and we would not have a unified government in support of Donald Trump. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. It's the turnout, stupid, from electoralvote.com. The dominant story of the election thus far is the turnout. Donald Trump collected 62 million votes in 2016, grew that to 74 million in 2020, and will check in a bit less than 74 million this year. In other words, to the extent that he won new voters over this year, they were offset by voters who jumped ship. He really does have a pretty hard ceiling. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton collected 66 million votes in 2016. Joe Biden got 81 million votes in 2020. And this year, Kamala Harris is going to end up with about 68 million votes. Where did all those Biden voters go? 13 million fewer voters showed up for Democrats. It's a question that will haunt Democratic operatives, not to mention political commentators, for months or even years. Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, brace for a Trump presidency. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance demonized the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, who are in Ohio legally. They were recruited to come there to take jobs that local people wouldn't. They're here legally. And Donald Trump and J.D. Vance demonized them during the campaign, put their lives in danger. And now they're hanging out in Springfield going, fuck, Donald Trump got reelected. And he and J.D. Vance both said they want to deport them back to Haiti. It's disgusting. This is why I love living in California. I feel safe, for lack of a better word. Gavin Newsom moves quickly to counter an incoming Donald Trump. And I was talking to a buddy of mine last night who works in the California Attorney General's office. He's been there for about 6 years. He's like, yeah, we've been preparing for this for about the last 18 months. That made me feel good too. On the day that Trump declared victory in the presidential race, Gavin Newsom resurrected efforts in California to thwart Trump by asking state lawmakers to preempt potential Republican actions that could impact the Democratic-led state. That's awesome. So our governor and our state legislature and our attorney general are already on the case. Quote of the day from Stephen Colbert. As a late night host, people often say to me, come on, part of you has got to want Trump to win because it gives you so much material to work with. No. No one ever tells the guy who cleans the bathroom, wow, you must love it when people have explosive diarrhea. There's so much material to work with. That is such an appropriate metaphor. Donald Trump, explosive diarrhea. George Conway writes, America did this to itself. We knew, we have known for years. Every American knew or should have known the man elected president Thursday night is a depraved and brazen pathological liar, a shameless con man, a sociopathic criminal, a man who has no moral or social conscience, no empathy, no remorse, also a rapist. He's also a rapist. He has no respect for the Constitution and the laws he will swear to uphold, and on top of that, he exhibits the emotional and cognitive deficiencies that seem to be intensifying. And that will only make his moral turpitude worse. He represents everything we should aspire not to be, and everything we should teach our children not to emulate. All of that is true. And Donald Trump gained support in 48 out of 50 states. Donald Trump gained support in this election over 2020 in 48 out of 50 states. Doug Sosnick offers that this election was a repudiation of the Biden presidency. Dissatisfaction with the direction of the country was too much for Kamala Harris to overcome. This election marked the 11th election out of the last 13 where the country voted for change. The exit polls showed that 73% of voters thought that Trump was more likely to bring about needed change in our country compared to only 25% for Harris. Well, they're correct. They're correct. It's just that the change that Donald Trump is going to bring about is going to be authoritarian theocracy. Yeah, and he's going to be an autocrat. So if you're not white and or you have a uterus and or you're a member of the LGBTQ community, I would posit that's not exactly the kind of change you were looking for. This one I liked. Living in Two Worlds. Sharon Quinsott, a sociologist at Grinnell College, wrote about her field work with Trump supporters. She goes out into the field and interviews Trump supporters. Their sources of information are nothing we have ever heard of. Yes, there is that still staple of Fox News and Newsmax. There's also a lot of reading of the Epoch Times, One American News, and Rumble. But I had a deep conversation with a native Hawaiian, let's call her Lily, who regards Trump as a demigod. She showed me on her phone the stuff she reads and listens to every day. I have never heard of any of them before, but we listened to them together. The conspiracy theories in these sites are wild, to say the least, but she is convinced that they are true. Lily and I are living in two different worlds. The most powerful unelected man ever, skipping like a dipshit. America just elevated one man to an unfathomable status, the most powerful civilian ever. Elon Musk now sits at the pinnacle of power in business, government influence, and global information and misinformation. Trump has the White House for 4 short years. Musk has so much more, since his influence cuts across the government, the media, business, the world, space, and time. Well, that's terrifying. Abortion rights did not help Democrats at the polls. Fuck. Democrats rage against Biden's arrogance. Democrats are directing their rage over losing the presidential race at Joe Biden, who they blame for setting up Kamala Harris for failure by not dropping out sooner. Said Manley, Jim Manley, a former aide to Harry Reid, he should not have run. This is no time to pull punches or be concerned about anyone's feelings. He and his staff have done an enormous amount of damage to this country. Also, I found this quote interesting from Democratic Representative Richie Torres from New York. Donald Trump has no greater friend than the far left, which has managed to alienate historic numbers of Latinos, blacks, Asians, and Jews from the Democratic Party with absurdities like defund the police, from the river to the sea, or Latinx. His words, not mine. He's a Democrat. Democrats assess the wreckage from a nationwide collapse. Yeah, I bet they do. Harris offered Democratic defiance as she conceded the election. I watched her concession speech, and I don't know how the fuck she was so happy during that speech. I'll put it that way. But she was cheerful, I guess. She was very upbeat. And I think she ran probably the most professional campaign that I've ever seen. This is not a time to throw up our hands, she said. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. That is true. Another website offered some additional thoughts about the election. Trump has forced a massive realignment of the Republican Party built around a multiracial working class base. A multiracial working class base. 10 years ago, that was the Democratic Party. Trump will initiate mass deportations. I suspect he's more interested in the photo op than the hard reality of what it takes to get it done. That may be true. If Trump pursues the tariff policies he espoused on the campaign trail, it will send the economy into a recession and possibly a depression. Trump's age and cognitive fitness will be an issue from the moment he's sworn in. Well, he's only got to make it through the first 2 years of his term before his cabinet can use the 25th Amendment to remove him and install J.D. Vance. If J.D. serves less than 2 years of Donald Trump's term, J.D. Vance will still be eligible to run for 2 full terms and could be president of the United States for 10 years. Instead of pursuing what I think we've all come to realize is his true calling in life, which is being out there and impregnating all of these young, unpregnant women who just so desperately need to be impregnated so that they can have the children's. Trump's White House will once again be a snake pit of sycophants angling for influence and power. That's true. If Republicans keep control of the House, Trump will push a massive tax cut package under budget reconciliation rules to avoid the Senate filibuster. That's also true. Mike Johnson, if Republicans keep the House, Mike Johnson will easily keep his job as Speaker as long as Trump wants him around. Seth Maskett asks a good question. Do campaigns even matter anymore? This is a fair question. Kamala Harris ran, to my mind, a nearly flawless campaign. It was absurdly well-resourced, had a sophisticated turnout organization, and it's like, does get out the vote matter anymore? The weekend before Election Day, Kamala Harris's get out the vote people knocked on 3 million doors in swing states, and she lost every one of those states. She lost every one of them. They knocked on 3 million doors and included some very incisive and creative advertisements. She also dominated social media. She absolutely decimated her opponent in their one debate, headlined a well-orchestrated and well-received convention, picked an engaging running mate, and hit all the right themes in her speeches and interviews. Trump, by contrast, ran a sloppy, undisciplined campaign, was massively outspent, and it didn't seem to matter. Valid question. Biden invites Trump to the White House. Boy, this is going to be a fucking hoot. President Joe Biden spoke to former President Donald Trump on the phone Wednesday to congratulate him on winning the presidency. Biden also invited Trump to meet with him at the White House. An emboldened GOP Senate will empower Donald Trump. Yeah, they're going to give him 2 or 3 Supreme Court seats. They're going to confirm every person. They're going to confirm every fucking whack job he nominates for cabinet positions. They're going to confirm every ludicrously unskilled, unqualified person that he nominates to be a federal judge. And I'm just hanging out now waiting to, I made this joke at band practice last night. I'm just waiting for our new Secretary of Defense, Herschel Walker, and I'm waiting to see whether South Florida federal judge Eileen Cannon is going to be elevated to Attorney General or to the Supreme Court. They're going to give him absolutely every single thing he wants, and they run the confirmation process. So they're going to, if he gets a Republican House, we're going to be fucked. Sorry. Biden's vulnerabilities led to a bloodbath for Kamala Harris. Harris inherited a campaign from Joe Biden over the summer that appeared to be flatlining, given the president's unpopularity and inability to carry a message. And after Democrats excised Biden from the ticket, she rapidly consolidated the party, rallying women, yada, yada, yada. The president's inability to carry a message. That's an extremely polite way to put it. I mean, it's like, did this author for Politico see the debate between Trump and Biden? Donald Trump has humiliated his foes. Think Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. I don't like that article. Far-right Trump supporters celebrate. Donald Trump will be the next president, and the same far-right extremists emboldened by his first administration are celebrating his win with violent memes and threats. They're on Telegram and Rumble. Many of the social media posts reviewed for an article by Wired reveled in fantasies of Trump locking up and even executing his political opponents in revenge. Awesome. And allegedly, he's still going to pardon all of the J6ers, which will turn the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and the 3%ers into his private little militias. Having been pardoned, they will believe they have a free pass to do whatever they want on his behalf. The Justice Department is winding down Trump's 2 criminal cases in D.C. for January 6th and Florida for the Mar-a-Lago documents. That's depressing. I would be surprised if there is a sentencing on his 34 felony counts in Manhattan later this month. That judge has already signaled that he is contemplating throwing out that entire case. However, with the case in Fulton County, Georgia, that's a state case. Donald Trump cannot pardon himself or any of his 18 co-defendants in that case because it's a state case. Fani Willis has reached plea deals with 4 of those defendants, 3 of whom were Donald Trump's attorneys. And she can still go ahead and prosecute all of those people apart from Donald Trump. His co-defendants in Georgia, many of them have also been indicted in Michigan and Arizona. And I know that Wisconsin is working on that too. So all of his co-conspirators can still be prosecuted at the state level, and he can't pardon them. RFK Jr. says he won't take away vaccines if he's put in charge of the nation's health care. Awesome. The stock market surged over like 14 or 1,500 points yesterday, Wednesday, after news of Trump's reelection broke. Elon Musk, his net worth increased by $16 billion yesterday. This one I talked about in a TikTok. I'm going to say it again just because I think it is very eloquently written by a columnist named Lisa Lehrer, L-E-R-E-R. America hires a strongman. Donald Trump told Americans exactly what he planned to do. He would use military force against his political opponents. He would fire thousands of career public servants. He would deport millions of immigrants in military-style roundups. He would crush the independence of the Justice Department, use government to push public health conspiracies, and abandon allies abroad. He would turn the government into a tool of his own grievances and punish his critics and richly reward his supporters. He would be a dictator, if only on day one. And when asked to give him the power to do all of that, the voters said yes. This was a conquering of a nation, not by force, but with a permission slip. That's a hell of a sentence. Now America stands on the precipice of an authoritarian style of governance never seen before in its 248-year history. The American people have made a disastrous choice, and they have done so decisively and with their eyes open, all so they could avoid electing a woman. That one, I've already covered that, man. Well, allies fret over Trump presidency. Hey, no shit. Go back to that Le Monde article that I read at the beginning. Russia has now enlisted North Korea into its nearly 3-year war in Ukraine, where it is making slow but steady advances. Israel's year-old war with Palestinian militant group Hamas in Gaza, that's a strange way to put that, has expanded into an invasion of Lebanon. They got troops on the ground in Syria too. And the first ever direct exchange of missiles between Israel and Iran. China is giving crucial economic and political support to the cooperation among Moscow, Pyongyang, and Tehran, while strengthening its own military for a possible war over Taiwan. Great. That is fucking fantastic. David Frum wrote earlier this week's columnist writing for The Bulwark these days. These past few months, my plan for 2025 was to retire from political journalism. It seems I'll have to make new plans. Good. I'm glad. I disagree with David Frum most of the time, but he is an incredibly good writer. Regardless of what he's writing about, he is an incredibly good writer. The news media blew it. Boy, there's an understatement. Oliver Darcy writes, the post-2024 autopsy will not be kind to the American news media. At least in 2016, Trump and his tactics were new to the scene. This time around, not so much. Lessons that were learned over the Trump years were disregarded as he sought to regain power, and that warrants some hard questions. Looking at you, CNN, and MSNBC, frankly. Along those lines, a television executive quoted by New York Magazine said, if half the country has decided that Trump is qualified to be president, that means they're not reading any of this media, and we've lost this audience completely. A Trump victory means mainstream media is dead in its current form. And the question is, what does it look like after? It looks like this. It looks exactly like this. It looks like Hawk doing podcasts. Oh, man. Coming to you live from the White House, where the president has seemed to have shit his pants yet again. And see, you don't know which president I'm talking about. Oh, Trump won over young men. Okay, I saw several women on TikTok yesterday sharing the same phrase, that men could have gone back to raw dogging for eternity and instead chose celibacy by voting for the candidate who overturned Roe versus Wade, who's going to take away their right to birth control. Those guys voted for Trump, and now they're not going to get laid for a decade. Let's see here. Charlie Sykes, retired founder of The Bulwark, co-founder, he's still a columnist with MSNBC, writes, whatever the final margin, the American people have returned this blatantly, dangerously unfit man to power. In the end, nothing mattered. Not the sexual assaults, the frauds, the lies, or the felonies. not the raw bigotry of his campaign, not the insults nor the threats. In the most graphic terms imaginable, the American people were warned of the danger. His previously loyal vice president refused to endorse him. His top general called him a total fascist. Some of his closest aides and cabinet members described in detail his erratic character and his indifference to the Constitution. But in the end, Trump was right. He could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and still win a presidential election. But we know now that it was worse. Trump never fired a weapon on a New York City street, but he stood at the center of our politics and incited a mob to attack the U.S. Capitol, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter that he tried to overturn a free and fair election. This is the hardest part about today, realizing that our fellow Americans saw all of that, watched all of that, listened to all of that, and said, yes, that's what we want. That's who we are. Charlie Sykes is also an excellent writer. Paul Krugman wrote on Twitter, "Don't ask whose fault this was. Plenty of time for second guessing and recriminations. Ask instead, what can you do? For my part, that means telling the truth as I see it, as long as I can. The media will be under a lot of pressure to toe the line. Don't capitulate in advance." That reminds me. Look at this little book. It's a little book with large type. It is a book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. It's a quick read. I talked about this in one of my last podcasts. I recommend that everybody buy this and read it as part of your preparation for a Donald Trump presidency. He goes over 20 things to do or be aware of or not do if you're living under tyranny or if you're about to live under tyranny. It's an incredibly helpful book. I read it again last week. I highly recommend it. It's $9 on Amazon, if that. On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. Donald Trump's revenge. I don't know that we need to talk about that one. Trump victory reverberates through the markets. Stock market went nutters. The market loves the fact that Donald Trump has been reelected and is going to impose tariffs that are going to completely fucking destroy the economy in which these businesses operate whose stocks are in the market. That seems reasonable. I'm going to stay away from some of this darker shit. Trump banned certain reporters from his election rally at Mar-a-Lago. I love that. Okay. And we had two statewide referendums on the ballot in the state of Florida, codifying abortion rights in the state constitution and legalizing recreational marijuana. Because of the rules in Florida put in place by Republicans, for those to have passed, they each would have had to have gotten 60% of the vote. The abortion rights referendum got 57% of the vote. The legalization of recreational marijuana referendum got 56% of the vote. In normal elections, those numbers would be a blowout landslide victory. But because Florida rules require that they get 60%, both of those failed to pass. However, a huge majority of people in Florida voted in favor of abortion rights, in direct contradiction to Ron DeSantis and his 6-week abortion ban, which is in effect in Florida. And Republicans, as they do across the country, oh, the voters want X, Y, and Z. Fuck you. We're giving you a potato instead. Steve Bannon brings back the Willard Hotel War Room, where he camped out for days ahead of the January 6th attack on the Capitol in 2021. And he said prophetically and correctly, credit where credit's due, Unlike in 2020, we will secure Trump's victory this time. Hey, you know what? Since Trump won this time, I wonder if they'll finally shut the fuck up about 2020 being stolen. Probably not. He's probably just going to prosecute thousands of people. So, when the election was called for Donald Trump, I had a boatload of people in the comments of my TikTok videos saying, guess we should have stuck with Joe Biden, huh? Now, don't you feel bad about saying Joe Biden should have dropped out? No, I don't feel bad about that at all. Because polling company YouGov.org, I think, last weekend polled a couple of thousand people on a presidential matchup between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And Joe Biden lost about 3 times as worse than Kamala Harris did. So Donald Trump's victory would have been even greater had Joe Biden been the candidate. Marjorie Taylor Greene says this election is about getting January 6th rioters pardoned. Of course, because fuck the world. She says in her usual eloquence, January 6th was not an insurrection, and agent provocateurs fueled that protest, Greene wrote on Twitter, kicking off the message with apparent typos. Most January 6ers were nonviolent and just walked around the Capitol. Vote Trump so we can get them pardoned. Oh, man. Oh, boy, howdy. She began her Election Day message by sharing a social media post from an account belonging to a married couple, Tara Stottlemyre and Dale Jeremiah Shalvey, Jesus Christ, who were sentenced on felony charges related to the attack. The post described how Stottlemyre and her husband had been separated from their young daughter during their prison sentences, and they blamed that on Kamala's DOJ. Noting that Stottlemyre could not vote as a result of her conviction, it encouraged others to support Trump and suggested he might free people who were incarcerated for taking place in the violence. Please vote to send home the J6 moms, the J6 dads, the J6 grandmas, and the J6 grandpas, Stottlemyre wrote. According to federal prosecutors, Stottlemyre and Shalvey were among the first people to breach the barricades at the Capitol on January 6th. Shalvey was convicted of having assaulted members of law enforcement during the breach, throwing an object that hit an officer with the police department. The pair subsequently broke into the Senate chamber and rifled through senators' desks. Stottlemyre did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Sounds like they did a little bit more than just go inside and walk around inside the Capitol. Here we go. Bernie Sanders torches Democrats for abandoning the working class people and funding the extremist Netanyahu in brutal statement on Trump win. In a statement released Wednesday afternoon, Sanders blamed the Democratic Party for abandoning hard working class people. It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. First, it was the white working class. Now it is the Latino and black workers as well. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they are right. Today, while the very rich are doing phenomenally well, 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and we have more wealth and income inequality than ever before. That is accurate. Sanders also blamed the Democrats' stance on the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas and their relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the brutal election day that saw the party lose both the presidency and the Senate. And we're still waiting on the House. He said, today, despite strong opposition from a majority of Americans, we continue to spend billions funding the extremist Netanyahu government's all-out war against the Palestinian people, which has led to the horrific humanitarian disaster of mass malnutrition and the starvation of thousands of children. Hard to argue with that. This was interesting. Breakfast Club radio host Charlemagne the God warns Democrats against just chalking up Trump win to racism and sexism, and said Democrats might just be really out of touch. And he talked about a lot of the same things that Bernie Sanders did. Here's the thing, man. Democrat leadership is completely out of touch with the actual base of their party. They've always been completely out of touch with the actual base of their party. I've said many, many times that during the Trump years, elected Republicans have lived in absolute terror of their base because they're afraid their base might kill them. While Democrats have consistently and in an ongoing basis completely ignored their base, essentially looking at the base of the party and going, fuck you, who else are you going to vote for? And not listening to anything that the base of the Democratic Party has to say. And they didn't listen to anything the base of the Democratic Party had to say until it was time for Joe Biden to drop out, until that debate happened at late June. That was the first time in recent memory that I can think of that the Democratic Party, quote unquote, actually listened to its base. So 2 more left. There's a guy named Mike Davis. He's a Republican lawyer who Donald Trump is reportedly considering as a candidate for Attorney General. Celebrated Trump's election with some pugnacious and even disturbing rhetoric on Wednesday. Disturbing rhetoric. That's so unlike Trump supporters. Fuck unity, he wrote on Twitter. We have the votes and they tried to kill Trump. He then wrote, here's my current mood. I want to drag their dead political bodies through the streets, burn them, and throw them off the wall. Legally, politically, and financially, of course. He also wrote, America isn't worthy of Trump, and urged special counsel Jack Smith and former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney to, quote, lawyer up. The attorney, his social media rampage is sure to fuel concerns over how Trump's second administration might target his political enemies. Mike Davis is just a raging asshole. Last November, he suggested that Mehdi Hasan, then of MSNBC, had made... He said he's going to indict and detain, denaturalize, and deport Mehdi Hasan. He said, I already have his spot picked out in the DC gulag. I'll put him in the women's cell block with Tim Miller of The Bulwark and MSNBC, because Tim Miller's gay. So these whiny leftists don't get beat up as often. This is who they are. Okay? This is who they are. Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, delivers a stirring message after a sorry night. He says, here's what we know, is that we don't really know anything, and that we're going to come out of this election and we're going to make all kinds of pronouncements about what kind of country this is and what kind of world this is. And the truth is, we're not really going to know shit. And we're going to make it seem like this is the finality of our civilization. We're all going to have to wake up tomorrow morning and work like hell to move the world to the place. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of feeling like this. I'm tired of tomorrow's another day. I'm tired of we have to get up and fight. I'm tired of this shit. I am tired of this shit. I'm tired of it. I'm just fucking tired of it. As I sit here right now, less than 48 hours after Donald Trump won re-election, I'm fucking tired. Sorry. I'm tired of this shit. Tomorrow's another day. We have to get up and fight and organize. I'm just cranky. Sorry. I'm tired of this shit. I'm tired of fighting for people who don't look like me just to be able to fucking exist, you know, and live their lives as who they are. I'm tired of that. It's 2024. Anyway, sorry to get cranky there. I apologize for that. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Hawk Droppings. We're going to continue to move forward. My brother and I are going to continue to do the work that we've been doing. As always, we're incredibly grateful for everyone who subscribes to our channel. Please leave any thoughts, ideas, suggestions in the comments, and please console each other accordingly. Please be safe. I will see you soon. Thank you.